Earlier to Avi Hyman, an Israeli government spokesman, I asked him, was the use of force as described by that resident of Gaza really necessary?
I'll tell you that that was a precise operation done in full accordance with international humanitarian law. We told the hospital we were coming, but obviously, and we told the personnel there and made sure that the patients were safe before going after the Hamas terrorists that were using the hospital once again as a base for their terror activity. We took out a number of terrorists. They were shooting from deep within the hospital complex. This is a violation of international law. This is a crime against humanity. And this is the brutal terrorist organization, Hamas, that we're up against.
It's also a breach of
hospitals as a human shield.
Also a breach of international law to mount the kind of operation that you did against the hospital. You acknowledge that?
No, I don't acknowledge that. We went in strict accordance with international law, telling the authorities, warning them before, making sure there was safe passage for the civilians that wanted to leave, and ensuring that the patients could be treated in the way that they needed to be, while we went after those terrorists that were holed up in the hospital, using the hospital as an operation center to conduct terror attacks against us.
I mean, this is all very familiar, of course, a similar operation against Al-Shifa last year. And the IDF has released a video of what it says is a weapon stash in the hospital. The BBC hasn't been able to verify this, but it does seem very thin pickings for a building that Israel said has been used as command headquarters.
Well, once again, this is a hospital that we've already dealt with some months ago. We know that there's not been a single hospital that we've entered in Gaza that hasn't been used for terrorist activity. They understand that every time Israel goes into a hospital, it makes international headlines. And these are the headlines that Hamas wants, because Hamas wants to stop the war and stay in power so that they can do October 7th massacre again and again and again. We won't let that happen.
Do you acknowledge, though, that these hospitals have become the last places of refuge for many members of the population in Gaza? One woman in Gaza City told the BBC there was no longer a safe place to go to. All the places have been bombed.
No, I reject that. We've set up humanitarian corridors from the very first days of the war. This area that you're speaking about was an area that was largely evacuated at the beginning of the war. One needs to ask himself, why are people still in this area if they're not affiliated to Hamas?
Well, excuse me, but I think that is a rather lame explanation. I mean, people in Gaza are being bombed on a daily basis, and there is nowhere safe for them to be.
There are safe areas within Gaza. We have
like Rafah, for instance, which you're about to attack.
Right, like Rafah, until we attack Rafah, because people were evacuated from the north, they were evacuated from the center of Gaza in an unprecedented way. I'm not sure of any military that's done this type of thing to avoid civilian casualties. We're going after Hamas. Our fight is not with the people of Gaza. And when we eventually...
You say that, but 31,000 plus Gazans have died as a result of Israeli actions.
Right, according to Hamas figures.
Okay,
we know that
you say you've killed less.
12,000
You say you've killed less.
Yeah,
how many civilians?
12,000 terrorists.
How many civilians have you killed in Gaza?
Again, we've taken out over 12,000 terrorists. We've taken out 19 out of 24 Hamas battalions. The last 4 battalions are in Rafah, and if we don't go into Rafah, we lose the war. It would be like asking the Allies not to take Berlin in the Second World War. That's absurd.
Okay, but the United States is increasingly nervous about your plans for Rafah. They say you haven't presented a plan for how you're going to move civilians out of Rafah. This in a conversation between Mr. Biden and Mr. Netanyahu today. Why haven't you presented a plan if you've got a plan?
We are committed to our war aims, which are to destroy Hamas, bring home all of the hostages, and ensure that Gaza doesn't become a threat to us again. I believe that the President of the United States and his administration are 100% on board with that mission, as Jake Sullivan stated in his press conference just now. Now, we don't need to agree about all of the tactics and all of the specifics of the mission, but we're on the same page that Hamas needs to be destroyed. October 7th can't happen again, and Gaza needs to be free of Hamas.
That was Israeli government spokesman Avi Hyman. And just before we go, the White House has said that Marwan Issa, the third most senior Hamas commander in Gaza, was killed by Israel last week. On Monday last week, Israel said it had targeted Marwan Issa, but was unsure whether or not he had survived. That's all from this edition of Newshour. From me, Julian Marshall, and the rest of the team in London, goodbye.